I'm your host, Andrea Bazemore, and welcome to another episode of The Black Apple, where we talk about education and social justice in the classroom. In my class, we focus on one important person of color each week. A couple of weeks ago, I chose Coretta Scott King to introduce students to the Coretta Scott King Award. As I was talking about Coretta Scott King, I made a reference to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and how Coretta Scott King was the wife of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When I asked students if they knew who that was, no hand went up. I was shocked that I had a room full of students of color and not one person knew who that was. Now, I know that my students are about 5 or 6 years old, and I know that January has not come up yet. However, I knew that I couldn't wait until January to introduce my students to one of the most influential people of color. So once I realized this, I started to explain the values that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught. And I knew that that connection was not clicking. So I stopped, dismissed my class for specials, and realized I needed to make a greater impact. So I came up with a new idea. The next day, I had dots in my hand, sticker dots. I had red dots, and I had blue dots. Students were lined up and randomly selected a dot by me. They did not get to choose what color they would be for that activity. The red dots symbolized privilege, and the blue dots symbolized oppression, and thus the red dots represented the white people, and the blue dots represented the black people. I explained to them as they came and sat on the carpet that the red dots were going to be given privileges automatically without doing anything to earn that privilege. They were given Play-Doh, they were given 2 M&Ms, and they were given a lot of praise. The blue dots, however, had to sit on my carpet, and they had to watch the red dots get that privilege simply because they were red dots. The activity lasted about 2 minutes. I set a timer, and once the timer for 2 minutes went off, I had students, red dots and blue dots, come to the carpet and have a discussion. The blue dots were visibly upset, and the red dots, though they were given these privileges, once they realized that their friends did not have privileges, they didn't feel so good. So I immediately asked the red dots, how did you feel? And they said, okay. I said, did you earn a red dot? And they said, no. You gave me that red dot. I did nothing to earn it. And so I turned to the blue dots, and I said, blue dots, how did it feel? Some students had tears in their eyes. Some students pouted. And all students agreed that that was not fair, and that they felt upset, and some even angry. So I explained to them what each dot symbolized. Red dots for the white people and blue dots for the black people. And I talked about how Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wanted for red dots and blue dots, or blacks and whites, to feel equal and have equal opportunity and have a fair advantage. So I dismissed all of my dots. Blue dots got to finally have that advantage of playing with their Play-Doh and getting their 2 M&Ms. Red dots, however, had to sit on the carpet. They needed to learn about what privileges they were given, and they needed to know how it felt to be a blue dot for that instance. As students were playing or listening, I read a book about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I made references to our activity. And when it was time to dismiss, I knew that students had gained a greater sense of empathy and understanding, and they had the base knowledge of what it meant to be segregated, of what it meant to be oppressed, and of what it meant to have privilege. and they had an understanding of the responsibility that each student has when there is privilege. And it was important that I not stop at red dots and blue dots. It was important that I actually use the term Black people and white people so that they could realize the reality of what Dr. Martin Luther King did. Now, a month later, after the activity, my students still, with a little bit of prompting, can understand the basics of what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did. I couldn't wait until January to impart this knowledge on my students. I had to make it known, and I had to have them realize what an important figure he was and how his work in the 60s has brought us closer together. Thanks. And remember, education is power, but knowledge is sweet.